Russian forces are advancing on Ukraine's capital of Kyiv. While some Ukrainians have fled, others are staying to fight. Also, President Biden is joining other world leaders in slapping major sanctions on Russia. Joining us in studio to discuss the conflict is Talking Points breaking news analyst Teagan Brown and White House analyst Jacob Goldberg. So, Teagan, Ukraine is pushing for immediate admission to the European Union. How likely is it that Ukraine's added to the bloc as a member?
Now, something that the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said today is that she believes that Ukraine has their place in the UN and that they should be in it. However, this decision is not up to her, even though she is the commissioner. It has to be a vote of all 27 countries, and each one of them has to say yes. If one of them says no, Ukraine will not be admitted in. Now, von der Leyen said that some of these countries have expressed concerns and have already, kind of leaned toward a no answer. So honestly, the likelihood of Ukraine being granted admission into the EU is probably pretty low due to at least, one of those countries saying no.
And it's important to know that Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't feel like he's asking for too much in his admission speech into the EU. He says our goal is, quote, to be with all Europeans and most importantly, to be equal. So it's important to note that Zelensky doesn't feel like he's asking for much.
Teagan, I want to come back to you here. So Russia and Ukraine had discussions this morning about the border with Belarus. How did these talks go, and are there any negotiations that came from this?
So, Ukraine and Russia, their, representatives met earlier. They met for several hours, and, those talks just wrapped up, a few hours before our show. And something that we don't know is what was talked about. We're just really not sure because these talks ended. And, Ukraine going into this, they didn't want to go to this meeting because they wanted Russia to cease fire, going into this, and they just haven't. And they still have continued not to cease fire. They are still advancing on Kyiv. So probably within the next few days, we'll find out, more information about what came out of these talks. But right now, we just don't know.
Teagan, something we've been talking about a lot over the past week are sanctions. And on the sanctions front, we've seen sanctions imposed over time on many other countries, South Africa, Iran, China, and some of them have had results. The results have varied based on the type of sanctions being put. How are these ones different, and do you expect them to have an impact?
So Canada and the UK announced on Saturday that they were going to be imposing sanctions, joining on to these other countries that have already done it. And we've actually seen, Germany had reservations about imposing any sanctions due to, the relationship that they have for these natural resources with Russia. But on Saturday, Canada and the UK, they decided to bar, several major Russian banks, specifically by barring the use of SWIFT, which is a financial messaging system. And of course, Jacob is going to touch on that in a second with the U.S. But this has an effect. We've already seen in the past few days that Russia, citizens have been struggling and to get money from these ATMs, and Putin actually warned them. And as you'll see on your screen, these are countries that have imposed sanctions on Russia. All of those highlighted in blue, those are all involved in imposing these sanctions.
And so, Jacob, Teagan just mentioned SWIFT, and President Biden also recently barred Russia from using that global financial marketing system. What does this mean for the Russian economy?
Well, first off, SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. And what will this do? It will isolate Russia from international trade, and it will keep the banks unsecure from the fall of the ruble. We've seen the fall of the ruble in the past few days with all these sanctions against Russia, and it really will, put these banks in a bad situation. But it's important to note that many experts have called this the nuclear option for financial services, and it really is. You also have to realize that by putting, these barring of SWIFT against Russia, which is a top 15 economy in the entire world, you are impacting every other country in the entire world. The United States economy will be affected. Every country that is putting these sanctions against Russia will be affected by these.
And we've already seen, these financial systems affected. We've seen, stocks being affected. And, I kind of mentioned earlier, but Russian citizens in Russia, they're going to ATMs. They're taking out their money now while they can.
Now, Biden hasn't just talked about sanctioning Russian banks and businesses. The U.S. is now sanctioning individuals high up in the Kremlin now. Who are these sanctions going to affect?
Well, they're going to affect many leaders in up high in Russia's Kremlin system. And of course, Vladimir Putin and his family, they're going to affect them a lot. It's going to be, some sanctions we've never seen before. And here's what Jen Psaki had to say about these.
alignment with the decision by our European allies, the United States will join them in sanctioning President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov and members of the Russian National Security Team.
So we'll see more about what President Biden and Jen Psaki will talk about, at the State of the Union address tomorrow. But it's going to be interesting. We're not sure exactly what these sanctions will mean and if they'll go any further if Russia continues their invasion into Ukraine.
All right, Jacob and Teagan, thank you.